These are strange times. I'm a journalist. Usually our job as journalists is, when Comrade Karat is to speak somewhere, we actually sit there, listen, the next day write analysis, maybe agreement, disagreement, criticism. Rarely do we share a stage or a platform and speak in the same way that a politician does. But the last 4 years are a time that have brought all of us together for the simple reason that what is happening in this country has reached the point where not to take a position is cowardice, is to shy away from the facts of what we are facing. Today is actually a rather appropriate day to dwell on these things, because what happened at the Babri Masjid was not an event that started in the 80s or the 90s. It is associated with the parallel history of the Hindu right from its inception. In the same way that you look at the history of the freedom movement, there is a parallel history of the Hindu right, and the Babri Masjid demolition and its consequences, which we are living with today, have actually occurred in parallel. I would recommend a book, if some of you have not read it, The Dark Night by Dhirendra Jha, which is describing the events of 1949 when an idol was first placed in Babri Masjid. The involvement was of the Hindu Mahasabha. It was a plan that had been in the making for a good decade before that. The people, the chief conspirators were the Hindu Mahasabha, which was also involved in the murder of Mahatma Gandhi. Among the main abettors in that conspiracy was Digvijay Nath, who is the head of the same mutt that Aditya Nath comes from. In some ways, the mutt grandfather of Aditya Nath was Digvijay Nath, who was part of this conspiracy. It is this conspiracy in which the RSS was actively involved along with the Hindu Mahasabha. That was eventually used by the VHP. And the VHP again was set up with a similar agenda of using the institutional tools of Hinduism. The RSS had started as an organization to mobilize Hindus, but what they found was that the orthodoxy of Hinduism still lay outside the RSS, the sadhus, the kumbhs. The VHP was started in the 60s with the desire to appropriate these elements into the Sangh fold. And this is what the VHP finally succeeded in doing, that the entire Hindu orthodoxy, the power structure of Hinduism, the kumbhs, the sadhus, the akhadas all became part of the Sangh project rather than an independent source of authority in Hinduism. The Ram Janmabhoomi movement was driven by the VHP. It finally culminated in the debacle of 1992. We all know that the current consequences, the progenitors of the hatred that we live with today. I think yesterday all of you tell me, we have heard that these same people were marching through a campus which stands for academic freedom, for intellectual learning. The people who march today are an aberration, a blot, a tumor on this very campus. This is a tumor and an aberration that is not just on your campus, it reaches right up to the very top of society. It is today the governing elite, represented by Narendra Modi and Amit Shah. There is no difference between what happened in 49, what happened at Babri Masjid, what happened in 2002, and today the people who are ruling this country. There is a continuity here. This is a parallel history of our times which runs in step with the history of modern India. And this history is a history, unfortunately, till recently we had often ignored. We had always thought that the right was a marginal force till the last 10 or 15 years. in what was happening in India. And I think this ignorance is something we are paying for dearly. So I would suggest that apart from the protests, apart from the opposition to the right, what we need to go understand is how deep rooted it runs in the structure of this country. To understand the right is also very, very essential. The other thing I would say in parallel to this is, while we need to know our history, we must also understand what distinguishes us. It is also, as in the beginning we were told, the day that we should remember one of the chief architects of the Constitution, Babri Ambedkar. We have, in the course of arguing over the rightness and wrongness of what happened at the Babri Masjid, often got into arguments about history. Arguments about what happened in this country in the medieval era, what happened in terms of conquest, conquerors, raids, opposition. And I suggest to you that is a mistake we should not make. We must know our history, but let us not argue from history, because if you go to the Indian Constitution, I would ask you to read it carefully for the spirit, what the courts call the basic structure of the Constitution. At no place in the Constitution is there recourse to history in defining what India is. You can go through the Constitution and read it carefully. It does not say India is something that was shaped either by Aurangzeb or Akbar or Ashoka. It is silent on history, and I will tell you why it is silent on history. It is also silent on geography. You must remember these two things are critical. It appends the geography of India to a schedule at the back, which can be changed depending on the wishes of Parliament, what territories are called India or what are not called territories. Because the Constitution, in disrespecting both history and geography, stands in complete opposition to the RSS, which wants to make geography, Bharat Mata, and history as the definition of what we are. The Constitution prescribes a set of shared values that makes us Indian. It does not matter where our history comes from. It is a set of basic values, and those values are the values that we have agreed on as citizens of this country. It is that compact that makes us citizens. It is not because we have one great history that stretches in the past or we belong to some sacred geography, but it is this basic spirit, this value of humanity that we share with each other that makes us Indians. And read the Constitution in that light. That is what the Constitution guarantees. You look at the criteria for citizenship in the Constitution. It again does not take recourse to history. It only talks about residentship over the past 5 or 10 years in this country. Over and over again, this is a pattern that is repeated at the very heart of the Constitution. These values of the Constitution that unite us, that make us Indian, is exactly what these people are challenging. So in my way of thinking, what does this mean? It means that it is irrelevant what happened in the past in our history. In 47, we came together as a people with a set of shared values that we agreed on. And it is the violation of that value that happened in 1992 when that mosque was demolished by the Hindu right, by a deliberate conspiracy of the RSS, with BHP leading the fold, with every senior leader of the party involved. It was not just the bringing down of a mosque, it was the destruction aimed at tearing apart, ripping apart the fabric that constitutes India, the Constitution that defines us. That is a project that is still underway. The ultimate aim of this government is the aim that you see has already been partly achieved in Gujarat. It is an aim where an entire segment of the population is de facto second class in society. Muslims, who may form up to 8 to 10% of a society, of a state, do not have representation in the legislature, in the party structures, in terms of ticket distribution. an entire set of people without any official legislation have been declared and made to behave as if they are second class and made to exist. In that, you must understand that even the Congress has been a participant in that same exercise, and this is the danger of where the Congress is leading us in the way it is opposing this government. That we have to assert the equality of each citizen, to agree and to cater to the majoritarian view that this government represents, is to actually lose the battle before we begin fighting it. And I think in that sense, there is no better place than this to say it, because I think most of you know this. And it's a battle you've been fighting daily for the last 4 years. So I just want to end with those words and just again say that this is a battle that's been underway for the past 80, 90 years. At one point, we thought this battle was ended. It did not matter, but the last 30, 40 years have showed that the right is rising and gaining in strength, and is eventually aiming to replicate what happened in Gujarat across the country. This is what we have to avoid. That is what we have to fight against. Thank you.